So, today I am discussing one of the works by one Kaoru Mori, I believe it's pronounced, an artist who very clearly likes to draw maids and make stories about maids. And this story is volume one of two of Shirley, starring a main character by the same name who is a 13-year-old who somehow finds herself working for a 28-year-old, like, upper class lady who we'll get to. We'll get to. Before I start talking about the story, I do want to bring attention to this one page in the volume titled Little Maid. Under it, you get her full name, Shirley Madison, with a picture off to the side of her nice little graphic with like a, it looks like an orange background, and you get a little poem under it. I'm not even going to pretend to understand what that poem is like going for, and I'm not going to recite it here. This is going to be like the first of a few things with this one where I'm just going to be like, please discuss it in the comments. Tell me what's going on there. I feel like if I try to get into it, it's going to take up too much time with this. But yeah. If it's not already just directly a more flowery way of putting the themes that are obvious from this story. Alright. So the story starts with a woman who we learn is named one Miss Cranry Bennett, I guess. And she runs a little shop, runs a cafe, which she seems to enjoy. She seems to enjoy like bantering with her customers and all that. And we get her essentially coming home, and on the way home she's complaining about how much of a mess her home is, and that like, oh god, she needs to clean up all that jazz. And sitting outside of her home is, who we come to learn is Shirley, who is applying for responding to an ad that Miss Bennett put out for a maid. So like she's like, oh yeah, come inside, and we get like the interview where we learn the main details about Shirley. We learn here she is a 13-year-old homeless orphan. It's implied that she ran away from a place which was in some way abusive, and that like the reason she's applying to a maid is, and as we go through this, she was clearly like forced to clean wherever she lived until it was spotless, and that is like the kind of dark origin we get for her skill as a maid. Of like, yeah, you get into it, like she's really good at it, unfortunately. But and as they're talking, she says that the reason she came here was, at least in the translation, in this translation, it goes, this was the only place without an age requirement, by which we get a funny little bit of her being like, I literally just forgot to put one, darn it. But yeah, no, the relationship starts off nice. It goes like smoothly enough. But yeah, no, everything I just mentioned is basically kind of a thing of like hinting at this girl has had a very rough like first years of her life, and obviously the story you're ending up kind of getting into is essentially a thing where it's like this is mom now, this is daughter now. That's kind of the vibe you end up getting, is it's essentially an adoptive mom and daughter story of her being like initially hired as the maid, but like all that. But we'll get to before I move on to talking about chapter two, though, at the start and end of chapter one, there are two recipes of foods that are discussed during the chapter. If anyone out there has, or after hearing this decides to, or after reading it, decides to follow these recipes exactly and like go into like, if you want to, under the comments, talk about like how hard it was to make or like how it tasted. Yeah, no, same thing. Like I said earlier, feel free to. I would absolutely love to hear what you have to say. But yeah, chapter two is where that idea of this being kind of a new mom, new daughter thing starts to get into the thing. Obviously, Shirley having the past that she has is like, it's like the character where she's not like horribly traumatized. Like she's very much like a nice, like you. It's the kind of traumatized person who is like became like quiet and like doesn't want to disturb and like only wants to do what's expected of them. That kind of person is very much clearly what she is. So being put into a situation, you get like chapter two where like clearly the relationship has progressed a little bit more than enough that Miss Bennett is just casually while she was out was like, I'm gonna buy her a doll, and then she comes home with the doll after a day of work, and like Shirley is surprised to have like gotten a gift at all, and like you could tell there's still that little bit in her of like, I think there's literally a line that's like, it's not that she doesn't trust me. I'm not quoting it, but like she's basically saying, I'm paraphrasing. It's not that she doesn't trust me, but it's just that like she's not living a comfortable life yet, really. Something along those lines. So this doll is a kind of a new experience for her that she takes to. And then we get to a thing where Miss Bennett walks in on Shirley, and this is probably one of the most interesting scenes in the whole thing for me because um, she is not only sewing clothes for the doll, but she has sketched up the like what she's going to make, and so uh, Miss Bennett just straight up compliments, hey, you could just be a fashion designer. Maybe that's a career path you can take when you grow up. And the kind of main thing of this chapter is, again, we're only on the second chapter, and this lady has already not only encouraged you to follow something, like to follow a talent, but like literally laid out like this is a career path you could choose to do as an adult, and basically like doing the thing of encouraging your kids' dreams, like almost without even trying to, and like that hits. It's like a nice little thing. This chapter with the doll, it's easily my favorite chapter, just because of how easily it demonstrates like a healthy like guardian relationship already being established, like not long after this whole situation started. Like even when she's not actively trying to, this woman is like helping this kid get over her trauma. Then we get to chapter three, which is the other chapter I consider the most interesting. Okay, this one is a little funny to talk about. First off, you get the chapter page, which is Shirley standing in the background, puzzled, and then in the foreground is um, Miss Bennett, like turned around. I guess she might be looking in a mirror or something, but she's like doing it's so hard to describe the pose. The best way I can describe this pose is that, like, this is literally the author now just going out of her way to make this woman sexy and to literally just give you like a tasteful thing. The thing is about the chapter overall is about like wearing a corset, like wearing dresses and stuff like that, and talking about like her blonde hair. If I haven't mentioned already, obviously you can tell just from reading this is set in like a European place somewhere. I believe I saw elsewhere that like Emma takes place in, which is another word by this, takes place in the Victorian era, and this seems to be connected to that. But yeah, there is very much a thing going on where like, okay, this chapter is, it basically does an interesting thing where it highlights, and these parallels exist all throughout the story, but it really highlights the parallels between these two characters and their dynamic. And I think the best way to describe it is you want what you don't have. To where Shirley, being a child, is looking at being a like child who was like has been homeless, was born poor, looking at this woman who is this like tall, very attractive, um, very traditionally attractive, upper class, uh, blonde woman, and basically not feeling any kind of like any of the negative. I mean, I don't want to say it isn't negative, just because of the way she talks about it, but she is very much looking at this lady as an ideal of what she wants to be, and is kind of thinking of like she literally she keeps commenting about the blonde hair, and like I have like black hair, and like so I can't have that, and like this is a kid who like clearly the idea of even dyeing her hair does not, it does not exist to her until it's like mentioned later in the chapter. But you're getting these comparisons where you have these two characters who are almost the opposite of each other in pretty much every way, except for like their good nature. Like you have the cuteness of a child who is just like this little girl wearing a maid outfit, compared with the sexy of this adult woman, right? And then and then like obviously the adult woman, while they're having this conversation, is basically trying to tell her like, hey, when I was a kid, I wasn't like valuing my blonde hair as much. I looked at like girls with black hair, and was like, I want that, and was even like considering dyeing my hair, but my parents were like, no, 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 no. And like this is kind of me pulling from the side of just like and like not really something that's said in the chapter, but also the idea of like even a lot of adults don't understand that like an adult woman can also be cute. It's not just like what it's not just one way or the other, and then you get into the uncomfortable topic of like how as early as 13 you can have girls who look way older than their age, and as a result they get adult men talking to them and all that. But like again, that stuff is not really addressed here, so I'm going a little bit off the thing. But just like yeah, all the different parallels, and honestly there's a lot of ways that these characters parallel that I have not brought up that I did notice while reading, but like it was kind of too many to even put in my notes and really think. So like yeah, no, again, more fodder for conversation. There's so many different ways that these two characters contrast each other, and this chapter really yeah put that into perspective. That said, you do have the little bit where like yeah no Miss Bennett has done this whole thing of like talking to Shirley and basically encouraging her uh, to like embrace her hair and embrace like the way that she like to embrace like what's the whole what's on the inside, maturity, all that jazz. Um, and then a little stinger at the end of like Shirley just being like, okay, I do like black hair, but blonde is still better. And it's just this little thing, just to kind of put a nail in of like, yeah, no, kids aren't gonna learn the lesson immediately just off of one good speech. Like they kind of will get it in their head, but it's gonna take a while for them to like actually internalize it. Like they're not just gonna change how they feel like that, and that's fine because the point of like raising a kid is for them to like grow over time. So yeah. Chapter 4, we get chapter 4 is interesting because it's where some of the some more of the dark. Okay, so like obviously from the beginning we get a little bit of the darkness of Shirley's background and where she came from, and now we're starting to get it from the other side of like we're starting to understand more of where uh, our adult character came from and the darkness in that being. I wanted to save this phrase for later, but it European upper class bullshit. That's what we're dealing with. Just yeah, we'll get there when we get to the conversation in chapter 5. But this chapter 4 is where it starts to be introduced of like this is a person of an upper class upbringing, so she's expected to go out and like attend like parties or like events, and is expected to basically meet and associate with certain people, and like it's not that she completely hates it when she has to talk to just people normally, but through this she has like relationships or just the ways that certain people talk in these environments that kind of clearly have some kind of gross like vibes and behaviors. She clearly doesn't like the culture that she came from, which is again why she's ultimately a freaking cafe owner who lives by herself. Is the idea. And there's a bit when she's at this party that's like hammers it in so hard where she's asked like 5+ times, are you still single? She has asked that multiple times, and it's just this clear like we're beating you over the head with the theme of that like other people are judging this woman because she's 28 years old and still isn't married and like runs a cafe and all that jazz. And it reaches a point where like being at this party pissed her off so much that when she gets home and she is greeted, um, she basically has a moment where she like angrily hands the hat to Shirley, and Shirley is like, I don't think she says it out loud, but she's clearly like, what's wrong? Uh, and Miss Bennett notices, and then she like puts on the smile and is basically like, she kind of just in a simple way says, I really don't like. Yeah, she doesn't even. She just says, I'm tired, which is very funny because, again, as we get into the chapter, she doesn't sleep all night. But we basically get a thing where, like, that anger that built up inside her throughout being out, she has to basically, like, tell herself, don't bring that anger in here like she does for a little brief moment, and she has to realize, okay, I cannot point my anger at this little girl, right? And obviously also the little girl, both before she goes to the party and after, we basically get the sense that at this point that like Shirley is the best aspect of this the woman's life, and that like the two sharing a home living situation, and like the chapter is literally called home. So that's the thing, is like this is like her comfort she can come back to after a long day to like calm down and all that, and that the relationship that she has is something that she already values like deeply. And then we even get a little bit to the end where like it's the next morning, um, and she goes to open up her shop, and she kind of like does point that still have some of the anger, and she points it a little bit at like kind of her customers, but she's kind of still doing it in a banter. She manages to rein it in and do it in a banter kind of way with the other customers, and that's also where we get like, okay, home is obviously the best place, but this is like the second best place for me. Is like this cafe is what I chose. This is what I want. I can. This is also, yeah. And like there's other funny little moments. I'm skipping over comments. But yeah, no. Her anger at the society that raised her is valid, right? And then we get to chapter 5, where like the nonsense that was I even really noticed this, but like like in chapter 4 we get where like home is the sanctuary, home is where she can get away from all that nonsense. And then in chapter 5 we have the nonsense coming to her in her home. I didn't even notice that while I was reading. But yeah, chapter 5, Rain. We have yeah, a person who comes along who I originally thought was her mom, but like from reading it, I'm actually not sure who that is now. But we basically get a person who, through again the social like customs and expectations, basically forces Miss Bennett into a situation where like, okay, I have to invite this person I don't like into my home because of all that. Um, and they have a conversation, and of course it is literally a conversation about like, why don't you want to get married, why are you just settling for this life of a commoner, just running a shop, all that all that jazz. And it's like like this is the most blatant things that like that are being said, of just like the woman just straight up basically, um, what's the best way to put it? As I said earlier, European upper class bullshit with a side of patriarchy and like freaking misogynistic beliefs coming from a woman. Like in this translation, she uses the phrase women's modesty, and she's literally talking about like what is wrong with these women who just like, what is wrong with this culture of women's independence that's starting to come along. Like it's wild. What she's saying, and obviously while she's saying all this, Shirley is being the maid and is in the room having to hear all this, and it's basically taking it as like hearing this woman um, just brazenly disrespect the person who to her is now her guardian, and Shirley can only like hold it in for so much before she just straight up has an outburst on the lady. She doesn't like, obviously this being the setting, like this, she doesn't cuss her out, but she basically, yeah, just tries to say what you're saying is nonsense. You don't know what you're talking about. Why are you talking to her like that? And Miss Bennett in the moment has to be like, in a moment basically feels like, and this is like a little bit of like, she clearly doesn't like the upper class living that she comes from, but there are, just by the nature of like these oppressive cultures, there are little habits and things that you're of like expectations that you've learned over time that like really get stuck in you. So even if you don't want to, there'll be these little moments where you kind of say something that you don't really want to say, or like you're just saying something to basically keep up appearances or keep the situation from getting worse. And in this case, that's what she does. Is Miss Bennett basically tells Shirley that that's enough. Please stop. Like she says it in honestly a little more meaner than way than that, but that's basically what she's going for. And then after the lady leaves, and then yeah, after the lady leaves, the rain stops, and there's a yeah no, I'm skipping ahead. There's a little bit about how like the rain came and went with this woman, but like just a little bit of like literary devices being used, right? Obviously, but so then you get a little bit where Miss Bennett goes to talk to Shirley, and it's basically like, "I'm sorry. I'm glad you spoke up. I know you meant well." And at that point, Shirley can't hold back tears, and this bit is interesting to me because there's a lot behind Shirley's crying here. It's not just like, I don't think it's just a thing of like you acted out and had to be disciplined as a child, etc., etc. Like, or that this is a thing of like, I guess you could say that like that was like the first time she really got yelled at by Miss Bennett. I guess if that makes any sense, even if she, you know what I mean. So that could be a little bit of a reason for the crying, but like, and even this like little apology here is just like that. I think more of the crying, yeah, is coming from like her understanding of like, this is what those are the kind of people that you have to deal with, and like just again all the disrespect, all the venom behind what was being said to this person who is now your like guardian, your benefactor. Um, like all the anger from that, and just like yeah, there's a lot going on here. It's like a very interesting combination of factors that led to this bit of like crying. Like honestly, if you analyze the story enough, there's probably more there that I can that you could go into. But yeah, no, that bit is a one that I really find interesting. There's probably more to talk about, like I said, than what I have even said here. But yeah, no, the story like just wraps up nicely. Where like yeah, the rain stops. We get one little we get a little bit more conversation of like, okay, we gotta go clean up the garden now, and that's just your like indication of like, okay, this like life will continue on of these two living together. It's your establishment of the status quo of what's you don't need to see anymore, etc. That kind of thing. You get what's going on. no, that's a nice little end to the thing for them to just have this little conversation. Um, so in the volume, I said earlier that this artist clearly likes draw maids, and we have two other stories that are each a chapter long that come afterwards that are also about like different maids who seem to be like within the same city and like are like connected, maybe not like closely. And I think I really don't understand their exact relationships here, but like these are clearly people who are like within the same area of upper class society around the same location. I think literally Miss Bennett appears briefly in their shop to talk during one of the bits. So like these are also other maids that are nearby, basically, that like their stories are being told here. Now, I'm not going to go much into talking about these stories directly, other than to tell you like, yeah, they're good. We can discuss those stories more so in the comments, but like all I really do want to say is that like I do like the second one. I do like I believe it's Mary Banks. I like that one, and I feel like I'm not opposed to talking about that one, but I do feel like I'm not adequately. I didn't want to also go through the stress of like trying to get everything out of this different, smaller story. I just wanted to focus on the big overall story of Shirley while doing this episode. So yeah, if you want to discuss in the comments or whatever, discuss those chapters with me, we or amongst each other. Yeah, we can do that. We can do that too. Um, so I mentioned earlier Emma, and that is so Shirley is basically a bunch of short stories. It's like 2 volumes, and only this first volume is officially released in English. The second volume, if you see, like you can look online and see that you can buy 2 volumes, but then the second volume is like the one I found was in French, for example. I can find an English version. Um, Obviously, there's a Japanese original, but like, so the thing I want to basically like, if you want more made story by this author, Emma is the bigger one. I believe that one is 10 volumes, so it's a full story, and also there is an anime you can watch too. Um, you can even watch that anime for free on YouTube. I will link that in the description, basically. So like, you can check out Shirley, but you can also check out that, and there's more there. I will say that like I literally learned about this story while I was browsing art, and I came across a cover of a fan book that had Shirley and Emma standing back to back, and I believe the fan book was titled Polychrome. Right. So yeah, no, it's just one of those things where like yeah, no, if you want to find like super niche stuff, there are certain places, like especially like places with a lot of art where you can get art from like any franchise that you can browse and come across new things. Like I said, I'm certainly glad I found this thing. I have not watched any like of Emma yet. Like I did try to watch it, but I don't think I even got like 10 minutes in, a little bit. So there's that too. So I don't know exactly how that connects to this. I believe it does, but like I wouldn't be surprised if Shirley had like a cameo in that or something, or like, you know. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this. I'll definitely come back someday to talk about Emma. Maybe I'll look into this author's other works because there was other stuff and see if any of that's worth talking about. But for now, just yeah, no. Enjoy what I'm offering here. Y'all have a good one.